Okay, so let's talk a little bit about nCloth. I have a plane, a sphere, and another plane. This plane is a little bit different. It has more subdivisions than this bottom plane here. So when I created the plane, I was in the channel box, and I pulled up polyplane and I set it to 20 by 20. I'm actually going to up this to 50 by 50 to get more. The more subdivisions, the better the quality of the of your folds. Actually, let's turn this down just a little bit, just for sake of things moving a little bit faster. Okay, so I'm going to select all three of these, and I'm going to go to the poly modeling and tell it to delete the history and freeze all the transformations. And now I'm going to select the upper object, which is going to be the cloth. I'm going to, on the effects menu set, I'm going to go to nCloth and say create nCloth. And then I'm going to extend my timeline to 400. And I'm going to make sure underneath the animation preferences, if you click on that, that the playback speed is set to play every frame, not to 24 frames per second. The max speed should be 24 frames per second, but we want this to make sure that it plays every single frame. So save, select the, it's already in nCloth, so now let's just hit play. So it falls, and it falls through, which is great. That means the gravity of this nucleus is working, and you can see if you select the nucleus that the gravity is set to 9.8, and so that's, sort of, that's our planet, right? Okay, so now what I need to do is select both of these and turn them into passive colliders. So go back up to nCloth and say create passive colliders. So now if I play, you can see that the cloth folds around the object. Let's turn on the wireframe and be able to see it a little bit better. There you go. So it folds around the object, and if we let it play enough, it will come to rest. So eventually it comes to rest. And that looks pretty good. And if you select the nCloth, you can see that there are tons and tons and tons of attributes for you to get the exact kind of cloth that you want. However, there's a much easier way to do this. If you have the nCloth selected, I'm in the attribute editor. Under presets, you can select a set of presets for a given type of cloth. So I would like this to be like a sheet, so that's kind of like t-shirt, and I'm just going to say replace. And we remember how this looks. I'm going to go back, and then I'm going to play it again. And you see that you get a much better full set of folds around the edges. Seems a lot more like, a t-shirt. So that's nice. And if it's not exactly what you want, you can go tweak those presets also. Okay, so you don't want, so what's happening right now is I've got to create the kind of initial, what I'm trying to create is an initial state for this, right? So I let it drop, it folds over the object, and where I would like to start is right here. So with the nCloth selected, I go up to Fields and Solvers, go down to Initial State, and say Set for Selected. So what this means is once I set this, when I go back to 0, this will be the initial state of the nCloth. So Set for Selected, go back to 0. Now so now if I play it, you can see it settles a little bit more. Stop. Fields and Solvers. Set for Selected. Right. It's always going to, it has a little bit of settle every single time. So normally when I'm animating with a cloth, I give it a buffer zone of like 30 to 50 frames before I start doing any animation, just so it can have its, like that's the unrenderable area. So it can do its little settle that it needs to do before you start animating. So now let's take a look at a couple of things that will happen with animation. So I'll go back to, I'm going to go to frame, let's do frame 30. I'm going to select the sphere, and I'm going to keyframe the sphere, and I'm going to go forward 10 frames, and I'm going to move this forward. Now, nothing's going to happen because it's not solving right now. It's not calculating how the cloth should move. So let's go back to 0, and then let's play from here. Let's play from here. Right, so it moved fast, so it kind of jerks itself forward. If you move slow, it will move slower. So let's see that sphere. I'm just gonna grab this keyframe and pull it forward. Say to 60. Go back. It's gonna keep throwing this error, this nucleus evaluation skipped, because we're jumping around on the timeline and it can't do the simulation if we're jumping around the timeline. I'm going to play this now. All right, so there you go. Now it looks like, something like, some nice movement there. Okay, so let's take a look at one more type of animation that you might do, and then we'll see how we might work to render this. Because there's one last little trick you have to do to render this. I'm going to select the sphere, and I'm going to just break these connections. I don't want it to be animating. What I want to do is grab the corner and pull it. And so the way that I do that is I'm going to create a sphere. I'm going to move that sphere. Oops. Where's my sphere? I'm sorry, not a sphere, a cube. What I'm talking about. Cube. Move the cube over to this corner. That. I'm going to zoom in on it. And I'm going to shift-click the nCloth, right-click on it, go to Vertex, and then select a set of vertices here. So I've got these vertices selected. Maybe I'll grab another one. And the cube selected. And I'm going to go up to End Constraint, and I'm going to say, I'm going to point to surface. So all of these are now connected to this sphere, and no matter what way I pull it, when I pull this, I keep calling it a sphere, a cube, pull this cube, it will pull the cloth. One thing you want to check is when you've got these selected, these constraints, you want to change this from spring to weld, because we don't want these to have any stretch to them. We want them to be sort of solid, unless that's what you're looking for. So let's zoom back out again. And now I'm gonna, wait my 30 frames. You can see it kind of pulls a little, so I'm gonna let it settle there. Actually, let's play that. Hang on. So it pulls because of the welds. Right, so I'm gonna stop. Select this, say constraint. Oh, I'm sorry, field solvers, initial state, set for selected. So go back to the beginning again. Perfect. All right, so now at frame 40, I'm gonna grab the cube, and I'm gonna set a keyframe, move forward, and I'm just gonna pull it to here. So let's go back to the beginning. So now one last little thing before we just run this. Well, let's run this as a simulation, and then we'll see what happens, right? So go in, and it pulls the cloth out of the way. So a pretty simple solution. So now there's a little bit of cleanup we got to do. First piece of cleanup is that this cube, we don't want the cube to render. So with the cube selected, I go to the attribute editor, go to the cube shape, and under the Arnold menu, you want to uncheck primary visibility. So now that will not render. And so that's exactly what you want. You also could not add it to the render layer, and then it wouldn't render also. But this is a way to just sort of take care of it globally. Okay, so the last thing is that what we want to be able to do is scrub back and forth with this simulation. If we want to adjust, sort of any animation that we want. And we want to be able to render it. And you need to be able to scrub back and forth if you're going to render. So I select the mesh. I go up to nCache, and I say create nCache for an object. And it will build a data set that will be all of the data for the movement of this across this timeline. And it will run the whole 400 frames I have here, although I don't need them, so I'm going to drop this to 250 frames. So now nCache an object. I had one already built, so let's just replace existing. There it goes. I needed very few of those. I didn't even need the 250, but you can see it's still moving over here. So and there you go. All right, so let's go. Now, when you scrub backwards, it's not a simulation anymore. It is a data set. And you now have a cloth that gets pulled off of an object and moves. So now this is something that you'd be able to render.